Kizaru has been the talk of the town recently with the release of a new SBS that implies that he could secretly be an ally to the Strawhat Pirates. Originally introduced as an antagonistic admiral, there's more to him than meets the eye, and if that's true, then Kizaru might be a lot stronger than we think. He's opposed the Strawhat Pirates twice now, thrice if you only count Luffy, but no one ever fell into a serious predicament that could cause the ruin of the Straw Hats. A human made of light operating at the speed of light with a versatile range of abilities, all soaked in sun-like symbolism, Kizaru might have known all along that Kuma was there to help the Straw Hat Pirates out. That's why he didn't rat out Kuma after he sent the Straw Hats away instead of killing them, which would have been the original intention as punishment for going against a celestial dragon. In fact, Kizaru might have volunteered to go to Sabaody after the incident to ensure that none of the supernova pirates fell to the world government, which would not have been the case had Akainu been there. Judging by that, Kizaru had to be holding back tremendously while fighting, yet he was always too powerful to fall even after nerfing himself. So in this video, we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty about Kizaru's anatomy, powers, and his possible allegiance to Joy Boy and by extension Nika. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Kizaru, origin and rise in the Marines. Kizaru, originally known as Borsalino, was born 58 years ago in North Blue. The likes of Akainu, the Vinsmoke family, Trafalgar Law, Don Quixote do Flamingo, Basil Hawkins, and X-Drake were born in the North Blue as well, so you can see why it was known as the strongest blue out of the four, as it's the place of origin for so many heavy hitters. Borsalino obviously fits right into this roster of extremely powerful characters, pirates and Marines alike. He and Akainu, more commonly known as Sakazuki back then, joined the Marines together when Borsalino was 26 and Sakazuki was 23. It's uncertain as to when Kizaru became an admiral, but it took place sometime after the death of Goldie Roger and at the nick of the golden age of piracy. At some point, he even ate the Pika Pika no Mi, or the Glint Glint fruit, which turned him into a light human. He was eventually put on a mission to arrest the genius scientist Dr. Vegapunk. This brought Kizaru into the life of Vegapunk, who brushed off the arrest warrant and asked how much money the Marines were going to pay him to fund his scientific research. Vegapunk asserted that must have been the case as to why the Marines made the excuse for wanting to arrest him, as they desired to have access to Vegapunk's knowledge. Naturally, Kizaru found the scientist to be quite amusing, and the two of them became friendly with one another. Eventually, Kizaru and Vegapunk met Sentomaru in a village that was being terrorized by bears, where the young boy had beaten up those very bears. He asked Kizaru for a job and some money, prompting the Admiral to take the boy under his wing and train him to become Vegapunk's bodyguard. Meanwhile, Vegapunk had been working on the Pacifista project for the government and wished to study Kizaru's anatomy, especially his ability to produce lasers as a light human. 4 years prior to the events of One Piece kicking off, Admiral Kizaru was sent to Egghead Island, which is Vegapunk's scientific base, which was still being built at the time. With the world government forcing a trade between Kuma's body and will to be turned into a mindless war machine, or the Pacifista, for the treatment of his daughter Bonnie's disease, Kizaru was dispatched to oversee the negotiations, ensuring that Kuma wouldn't rebel. Despite working directly under the government and getting orders from the Elder Saturn himself, Kizaru was never a heartless monster. He was visibly saddened by Kuma heartily accepting all the terms and conditions, sacrificing his body and mind in the process just for the sake of Bonnie. He stayed on Egghead for the 6-month treatment procedure of Bonnie, which was handled by Vegapunk, and grew close to the two of them. He, Kuma, Bonnie, Vegapunk, and Sentomaru would often eat and dance together, with Kizaru helping them to build Egghead Island. Kizaru becomes a prominent character in the Sabaody Archipelago arc after being dispatched to Sabaody because Luffy had broken a taboo by punching a celestial dragon. He arrived with Sentomaru, the mindless Kuma Pacifista, and several clones to wipe out the Straw Hat Pirates. This was the first time the Straw Hats were completely outclassed, and while Kuma and Sentomaru were visibly stronger than the pirates, Kizaru was on a completely different level. It became a marker for how much stronger the Straw Hats needed to become, not just to get the One Piece, but to even have a shot at getting to the New World and surviving there. He would subsequently be present during the Paramount War at Marineford, which took place between the Marines and the Whitebeard Pirates. More recently, we've witnessed Kizaru as a prominent character in the Egghead arc, as he was sent to the island alongside J. Garcia Saturn himself to kill Vegapunk, since the scientist was studying the Void Century and learning to read poneglyphs. Interestingly, he found himself on the side opposite Sentomaru, who was on Vegapunk's side alongside the Straw Hat Pirates, who are now a Yonko crew. Kizaru's Devil Fruit. The Glint Glint fruit that turns men into light. Kizaru is a user of the Logia type Pika Pika no Mi, or the Glint Glint Devil Fruit. This fruit gives him the power to generate and manipulate light in a variety of ways. Being a Logia, he can also turn into light itself, moving and traveling at the speed of light, shooting laser beams, creating weapons by manipulating light and regenerating and blinding his opponents. Because Kizaru is a light human, he can disperse his body into globules of light and send them to his destination, from which he can regenerate and reform himself once again. He can send out a light beam and instantly merge with it to travel at the speed of light. However, this type of locomotion only takes place in a straight line unless the beams are reflected off of surfaces that can reflect light, such as mirrors. This would allow him to travel in a zigzag pattern, much like Luffy's Snake Man. As light itself, Kizaru is extremely fast since he can travel and move at the speed of light. The only way to deal with his speed is by using observation Haki and ideally future sight, since that way you can know where Kizaru will attack from. This can then be followed by an attack infused with armament Haki, because that's the only way to land physical hits on a Logia. Without Haki, it is impossible to stand a chance against Kizaru due to his physiology and incomprehensible speed. A huge advantage that comes with this speed is how much Kizaru can enhance any melee attack. He generally sticks to his kicks, moving his legs at the speed of light to enhance its weight and momentum. This is similar to how the Flash from DC Comics operates, as greater speed tends to increase force. A simple example is crashing into a door while in a car moving at slow speed versus a car moving at higher speeds. The latter obviously does more damage than the former. The same logic applies to Kizaru using his speed to enhance his attacks to deal tremendous damage to his opponents. Kizaru can also shoot laser-like light beams from the bottom of his feet, eyes, and fingertips, which is what prompted Vegapunk to study him and became the basis for the laser beams the Kuma Pacifistas use. These laser beams can pierce through flesh and even set off huge explosions. Because Kizaru has complete and wide control over these light beams, he can unleash a volley of laser or laser bullets over a large area, and he's honed his skill, probably via observation Haki, enough to have pinpoint accuracy. While the Kuma Pacifista and its clones were programmed to have a laser feature modeled after Vegapunk's, Frankie's stay in Karakuri Island gave him access to the same technology, which he utilized on his cyborg body. Another character to use the same would be Queen, who could project the light beam while in his Brachiosaurus form. With complete control over light comes the ability to create blinding laser flares. He can also disperse the light to create clones of himself that act independently. If he's fighting a weapon user such as a swordsman, he can manipulate the light to create something akin to a sword and use it against his opponent. The only way an opponent can deal with that is by coating their own sword in armament Haki. The only weaknesses he has are the standard Devil Fruit weaknesses, such as seawater or the Sea Prism Stone. In Egghead, Sanji was able to kick his laser away, which was quite a surprise. This could be due to Sanji wearing the shoes created by Vegapunk, but Sanji described it to be the result of the power of his life. What probably happened was that Sanji's kick was strong enough to disperse light itself. Kizaru has displayed a variety of named attacks, with them mostly being inspired by Japan's three sacred treasures, which are imperial emblems from Japan, namely the sword Kusanagi no Tsuragi, the Yada Mir or the Yada no Kagami, and the beaded jewels Yasakani no Magatama. Starting off with the Yada no Kagami or the 8-span mirror, Kizaru uses this attack to form light between his hands and reflect it off of any surface of his choice. The surfaces don't have to be mirrors, but Kizaru makes them operate like one, as mirrors cause light to reflect and refract. His attack Amaterasu, named after the Japanese sun goddess, witnesses him using his index and middle finger to emit a flash of light that can blind his opponents. The Ama no Murakumo, which stands for the Sword of the Gathering Clouds of Heaven, badass, is used by Kizaru to morph light into creating a solidified sword. Finally, the Yasakani no Magatama, which stands for the Kama Jewel of 8 Shaku, is used by Kizaru to launch a torrent of lethal light particles. He can control the range of the attack, based on which the particles will either hit a concentrated area or a much wider one. This can also be used by the Admiral to make clones of himself, and each clone can operate on its own within the original body, leaving its spot if and when necessary. With that said, it's unknown whether Kizaru has awakened his fruit or not, since that should allow him to turn things around him into light as well, at least if we judge by how Paramecia awakenings. It wouldn't be a stretch to assume that the Admiral has awakened the fruit, since that could contribute to him being able to use any surface as a reflecting surface or have clones operating in his absence, but we haven't been told anything specifically. Unlike Akainu and Aokiji, we have not seen the inferior version of Kizaru's Glint fruit. What we mean by this is that Ace had the inferior Flame fruit, while Akainu's Magma fruit was the superior version. The same applies to Monet's inferior Snow fruit versus Aokiji's superior Ice fruit. In the case of Kizaru, we haven't seen a weaker light-based fruit, so it's not impossible for the Glint fruit to be the lower base version, with someone else in the top echelon of the world government or an antagonist in maybe Elbaf or Lodestar having the superior light fruit. How powerful is Kizaru? 12 years before Egghead, Kizaru was a vice admiral. During that time, he had defeated Arlong, who was working as a member of the Sun Pirates, with ease. As an admiral, Kizaru is obviously extremely powerful. You can't be an admiral without being that strong, especially when your Logia fruit is completely broken. He's shown off feats such as blocking Whitebeard's weapon with his leg, blocking a barrage of Gear 4 Snake Man Luffy's attacks, rivaling the armament Haki Master Sentomaru in defense and durability, and balancing himself nonchalantly atop a flying cannonball. One of the first displays of his strength and ability was in Sabody, a place he reached fairly quickly due to his speed. When a pirate tried to shoot him through the head, which obviously didn't work because of his Logia body, Kizaru retaliated by shooting a beam of light, which caused a mangrove in the archipelago to explode. All in all, his arrival to the island was teeming with pirates, strong and weak alike, causing mass panic among everyone. Because the pirates who went on to be known as the Worst Generation were stationed in Sabody at the time, Kizaru naturally came into contact with several of them before getting to the Strawhat Pirates. He got into an altercation with Basil Hawkins, X-Drake, Scratchman Apu, and the Mad Monk Uroj. Each of them was revered at the time for being a rookie with a bounty of over 100 million, all set to enter the other half of the Grand Line that is the New World. However, Kizaru outclassed them in every sense of the word, showing off just how powerful an admiral is. Hawkins was able to save himself as he could transfer his physical damage to his straw dolls. He then fought the pirate in his straw man form and was able to quickly incapacitate him. Against Uroj, Kizaru simply kicked him away at light speed while he crashed through several buildings. Next up, he fought Scratchman Apu, whose unique devil fruit should ideally allow him to land strong hits on stronger opponents while at a distance. Apu was able to make Kizaru's body explode with one of his arms cut off. However, this would be of no use against a Logia who could not exactly regenerate but completely reform from the ground up. Kizaru quickly launched his attack against Apu, flying towards him while Apu jumped from one roof to the next. Kizaru reflected his light off of surfaces and utilized his zigzag motion to get to his opponent, finally kicking Apu down into a building. Because his speed-powered kick was tremendously powerful, Apu crashed down into a building and demolished the facility. Drake was light work as Kizaru kicked him away with ease. Before he could go back to take Hawkins out, Sentomaru advised him to go after Luffy, Trafalgar Law, and Eustace Kid. Once he intercepted the Strawhat Pirates, Kizaru was able to take Zoro out with one blast, who was already fatigued because nothing happened in Thriller Bark and dealing with the Kuma Pacifista. He almost finished Zoro off and would have been able to do it had Dark King Rayleigh not reached on time and blocked Kizaru. Of course, it was Rayleigh's armament Haki that allowed him to stall the Admiral, and while we know how powerful Rayleigh was since his wife Shaky had already mentioned how he was stronger than all the pirates in Sabody, plus he was the right-hand man of the former King of Pirates, he could only hold Kizaru off for a while instead of being able to defeat him. He blamed his age for the gap in strength, and despite Rayleigh being extremely powerful himself, it was implied that Kizaru would have had the upper hand if the battle were to continue. Meanwhile, Kuma took this opportunity to send all the Straw Hats away to other islands using the power of his pawpaw fruit. Following this, we meet Kizaru as a notable character again in Marineford, where most of the spotlight was on Akainu, at least when it came to the admirals. One of the characters he clashed with was Marco, who had the mythical Zone Phoenix model Devil Fruit. Kizaru's laser beams didn't land much damage on Marco as he was able to easily heal from it due to the healing properties of his Phoenix Fire. However, he eventually blasted the pirate away. When Oars Jr. arrived, Kizaru tried to blow his brain away, but the action was halted by Luffy landing in front of the admirals, sent there via a log by Jinbei. However, as a Logia, Luffy's attacks did nothing to any of them. Luffy then went to second gear to get a speed boost, which paled in comparison to Kizaru's light speed, and the admiral kicked him far away. In one of his earlier attacks against Luffy, the latter survived with the revolutionary Emporio Ivankov intercepting it. Long story short, Luffy from Marineford was way too weak to have a chance against Kizaru, who could only be scratched, dodged, or blocked by top tiers of the verse, such as Whitebeard, or a renowned member of the Revolutionary Army like Ivankov. He would later incapacitate Marco after kicking Luffy towards Whitebeard. He did so by catching Marco off guard as he was shot in the back, and then the pirate had sea stone handcuffs placed on him, following which Kizaru shot the pirate 2 more times. Kizaru can be scaled above Marco, but obviously below Whitebeard, since Kizaru did not directly engage Whitebeard at all. Not because the opportunity didn't present itself, because Kizaru probably knew he would lose to the strongest man of the time. The one time he did do it though was when Whitebeard tried to stop Kizaru from going after Luffy, who had the keys to free Ace. Kizaru shot Whitebeard through the chest with his beam and then from a distance destroyed the key Hancock had procured for Luffy. That being said, Ace was eventually freed using Mr. 3's wax powers and then killed by Akainu, who went on to try and kill Luffy and Jinbei, but Trafalgar Law came to the rescue. Kizaru tried to go after them, which would have put Luffy, Law, and Jinbei at great risk, but the arrival of the red-haired pirates halted him as Ben Beckman held him at gunpoint while Shanks ended the war. Even though the Polar Tang went underwater, Kizaru tried to take them out and shot several beams at it, but fortunately failed to land a hit on the submarine. It was only after Sengoku called for a ceasefire that Kizaru stopped, and by the time the war ended, Kizaru had intercepted a total of 0 scars. The tide seemingly turned against Kizaru in the Egghead arc. When he returned to the island he helped to build to fight those he had befriended in the past. With Dr. Vegapunk and Sentomaru siding with the Straw Hats in their escape mission while being targeted by the government since Vegapunk was researching the Void Century, Kizaru arrived at the island with a horde of other ships and even Saturn to get the job done. Right off the bat, Kizaru was able to easily take out one of the Sea Beast weapons created by Vegapunk using a laser beam, which is a pretty big feat since every weapon created by Vegapunk has always been very powerful, such as the Pacifistas and the Seraphim. And although the Sea Beast weapons were never meant to be as strong as the other two, Vegapunk would never use weak weapons to be the first line of defense against enemies entering his base of operations. The island was also highly defended via the usage of advanced technology, but with his Glint Glint fruit, Kizaru was easily able to bypass all defenses and touch down on Egghead's Fabrio phase, following which he engaged in battle against his former ally, Sentomaru, who had left the Marines. Versus Sentomaru, Kizaru took the upper hand in a flash after engaging in a high-speed fight. Sentomaru eventually landed a hit with his axe, but Kizaru reformed from it and used a laser beam to cause Sentomaru to be blasted into the ground. He ultimately had to kill his former protege. Kizaru then went on to appear in the Labo phase, once again bypassing Vegapunk's defenses using the power of his fruit. This brought about a battle between him and Luffy, and unlike in Sabaody, the Straw Hat Pirate wasn't defenseless against the Admiral anymore. Luffy's first attack was blocked by Kizaru, but the Admiral had to quickly go on the defensive when Luffy changed into Gear 4 Snake Man and launched a flurry of blows against the light human. Due to his advanced observation Haki and armament Haki, Luffy could handle Kizaru's speed as well as land hits on him. However, Kizaru went on to warp around Luffy and kick him away, causing the pirate to crash into Vega Force 1 and then the Frontier Dome. It's not until Luffy goes Gear 5 that we see a large gap between him and Kizaru. Appearing in an enlarged form, Gear 5 Luffy grabbed Kizaru, making the Admiral worry about this being the pirate's rumored awakened form. Luffy managed to move his arm fast enough to launch Kizaru off the island, who returned to the Labo phase by dispersing his body into light particles. This was followed by Kizaru making light clones of himself, each of them holding a sword made of light, with which he managed to make a small cut on Luffy's cheek. Eventually, Luffy eliminated all the clones with a single kick, which was light work for him, pun intended. However, Kizaru's original body had already escaped and had reached Vegapunk's laboratory to look for the scientist. When engaged by Luffy again, he mentioned that he wouldn't be able to continue with his mission if he had to continue fighting Luffy, but that was Luffy's plan all along. Kizaru had to buckle up once he felt Saturn's presence, but Luffy used the momentum of his laser beam to spin around and managed to hit the Admiral square in the side of the head, landing a critical hit and sending him flying off into a building. The crash landing put Kizaru out of commission for a while, which didn't go unnoticed by Saturn, who could tell that the Admiral was failing against the Yonko. Meanwhile, Luffy had been drained of energy as well and morphed into his old man form, which happened as a side effect of using Gear 5. It's not until Luffy mysteriously gets food out of nowhere that he's rejuvenated, while Kizaru himself is seen sitting up, but we'll get to that later. A buster call was launched on Egghead soon after, and Kizaru, now back in the action, fired his light beams at the newly arrived Kuma, Frankie, Sanji, and the Vegapunk satellite Atlas. He even tried to slice through Kuma and Bonnie, but before he could do so, Gear 5 Luffy arrived at the party once more and punched Kizaru far away. After he returned, one of his most notable feats was stabbing Vegapunk's Stella body right through the torso using his light sword, mortally injuring his former friend. Sanji tried to escape with the Stella, and before Kizaru could go after him, a massive Gear 5 Luffy easily grabbed Kizaru in one hand and Saturn in the other. He then used the iconic attack known as Gum Gum Dawn symbol, smashing his two opponents together, flattening their bodies, and then spinning them on his fingers like pizza, once again showing a clear gap in strength between the newly appointed Emperor of the Sea and his two powerful opponents, who were seemingly not powerful enough in comparison to Gear 5 Luffy. Naturally, Kizaru was drained and exhausted, having taken beating after beating from an opponent he could cut through like butter 2 years prior to this event. Ultimately, the Straw Hats managed to escape with help from the Giants despite having to engage all 5 elders with his crew and allies. The mission to take out all the Vegapunks except York failed, as the satellite Lilith survived while the other 4 satellites, who had been taken out, managed to merge themselves using spare body parts since the government failed to procure punk records as well, allowing Vegapunk to keep his consciousness intact. Later, Akainu, who had gone from sharing the position of Admiral with Kizaru to his superior as the Fleet Admiral, condemned Kizaru for his failure, only for the latter to mention how he had to kill someone close to him. This indicates that while Kizaru did struggle against Luffy, he was, for lack of a better word, mentally nerfed because of the emotional baggage he was dealing with for having to kill his best friend, be it Sentomaru or Vegapunk. As an Admiral, Kizaru obviously has great mastery over Haki. The lack of it would not allow him to stand a chance against Whitebeard. We haven't seen notable uses of his observation Haki, bearing him sensing Saturn's presence when the Elder landed on Egghead. What we have seen, however, is his skill with armament Haki, particularly advanced armament Haki. In Marineford, Kizaru, alongside Akainu and Aokiji, blocked one of Whitebeard's quake shockwaves by emitting his armament Haki to create an invisible shield that proved to be strong enough to disperse Whitebeard's attack. Kizaru does not seem to possess Conqueror's Haki, and it's unlikely for him to have it as well, since we don't know of him having any kingly ambitions. However, he does have a will strong enough to resist Conqueror's Haki. He was unfazed by Luffy's Conqueror's Haki in Marineford, which is still understandable, but he proved to be one of the very few characters who remained conscious on Egghead after the Iron Giant unsealed Joy Boy's Conqueror's Haki, which had managed to knock most people out, and even sent away 4 of 5 of the Elders back to their place in Marie Joie. This is an insane feat, since Joy Boy's Conqueror's Haki is canonically the strongest display of Conquerors we've witnessed in One Piece so far, and that too by a great margin. Is Kizaru stronger than we think? And is he on the side of Joy Boy? Everything that ties Kizaru to Nika. Akainu might have been on a better run than Kizaru in Marineford, and he might be in a higher position as the Fleet Admiral, but several things, mainly symbols and words from Oda himself, contribute to Kizaru actually being the strongest Admiral. We know that One Piece has been diving deep into the imagery of the sun, with Luffy's and formerly Joy Boy's fruit being the sun god Nika model, Loki calling himself the sun god, lots of references to the dawn coming once again, and so on. Basically, if there's sun imagery, it's extremely important. Kizaru's attacks seem to operate similarly. The reference to Amaterasu in his attack is proof that Amaterasu is the Japanese goddess of the sun. While he doesn't have sun-like powers, which would be more Lunarian due to their indistinguishable flames, Kizaru could still be considered an indistinguishable source of light, adding to the imagery and symbolism attached to the dawn and the sun. There's also the fact that we remain unaware of an inferior version of the Glint fruit, so it is possible that the fruit Kizaru has is the inferior version of something, maybe something like the Mother Flame, which is allegedly indistinguishable and powerful enough to have powered ancient civilization. When Imu destroyed Lulusia, red laser-like beams rained across the country, obliterating it and wiping it off the map. The fact that Kizaru's zigzag action shares its motion with Luffy's Snake Man, which was one of the standout moments that foreshadowed how Luffy's fruit might be something different from being rubber-based, adds more weight to this connection. As a character, Kizaru seems to be more in the gray area like Aokiji than antagonistic like Akainu or downright villainous like the Elders. We already know of his connection with Sentomaru, Vegapunk, Bonnie, and Kuma, and we know that the actions Kizaru has had to take in Egghead have had a huge emotional toll on him. And the answer to it all lies in Oda's 110th SBS, which is directly responsible for us mapping out these possibilities. In the SBS, a fan writes to Oda asking about how Luffy was too exhausted after using Gear 5 against Kizaru, needed food, and couldn't move in chapter 1103, and yet he's seen rejuvenated after getting food from a mysterious source in chapter 1106. The fan asks about who it was that gave Luffy that fruit. To this, Oda mentioned how Sanji, Frankie, Sentomaru, and Kizaru were present there, and someone provided Luffy with food, but no one knows who did. It was almost as if it was done at the speed of light, to the point that the naked eye couldn't see it. Throughout it all, Oda emphasized the phrase speed of light, giving rise to the opinion among the fanbase that it was Kizaru who helped Luffy out. This would state that not only is Kizaru something of an ally, as a former friend of Vegapunk, Sentomaru, Kuma, and Bonnie, all of whom were siding with the Straw Hats and Egghead, but Kizaru is a lot stronger than we think he is. If it is Luffy who is exhausted after beating Kizaru, but Kizaru is secretly the one helping out, then did Kizaru truly lose against Gear 5 Luffy, or did he just let it happen? Did he let Luffy win? win? Luffy might still be stronger, but the gap between the two of them is surely far less than what Egghead made it seem like. There's also the fact that Rayleigh is canonically extremely strong and was necessary in driving Blackbeard away from Amazon Lily, and yet Kizaru would have won the battle in Sabaody had their fight continued. Due to his bond with Kuma, he should have also known about the Buccaneers' bias towards Dragon's Son. That is why he was in on the plan to send the Straw Hats away to specific islands where they could get stronger. With all things about the sun imagery and the possibility of him being an ally considered, we have to take a quick peek into one small but important detail. What did Kizaru do when he was helping build Egghead during Bonnie's treatment and Kuma's cyborg transformation? Surely he became friends with Vegapunk and co, but it's been explicitly mentioned that together they would all eat and dance. And guess who eats and dances? Luffy, Joy Boy, the sun god Nika. Why is that important? Because as a Buccaneer, Kuma knows about Nika. The story was passed down to Bonnie and to Vegapunk. It wouldn't be a stretch to say that Kizaru and Sentomaru had learned it well, which is why they all ate and danced together. This is why Kizaru explicitly mentions Luffy's new form when he sees Gear 5 Luffy in Egghead, because he knows from his friends that it's reminiscent of the sun god Nika. Marvelous verdict! The climax of One Piece and the end goal is to unravel the mystery of the world, and for Luffy, it's his freedom. But between the big reveal of what One Piece is, what happened 800 years ago, and this very freedom, lies the need for a revolution that causes the fall of the existing system that was established after Joy Boy's defeat. And to topple a system like the world government and the world created in Imu's image, you would need people who would operate from within. I mean, come on, who better to help bring the dawn than the man who's made of light himself? With that, today's video comes to an end. What did you think? Did you like it? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section down below. Till next time. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. This is Wizard Wheezy signing off, but thanks for watching. Stay safe out there and have a marvelous day.